Hey guys, leases fall into two categories generally. The two broad categories are residential and commercial. And what I'd like to do is talk about commercial leases today, and in particular the 5 types of leases. Now, some people may say there's 6 or 7 types of leases, but for the most part, there's 5 main types of leases, and there may be some variants, and we'll discuss that in a bit. So let's get to it. I'm John Kokolakis, and I help small businesses and families comply with the law and face their daily challenges so they can focus on growing their business and protecting their family. Okay, so now what we want to do today, getting straight to it, is talk about the various types of leases. Now, generally a tenant will think in terms of how much, what's my rent, what do I got to pay every month, and how long is the lease for? 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, or something more, right? Those are the simple terms. They'll usually then go over the lease, and they kind of just gaze over the rest and not really understanding many times or not caring as to what the rest of the lease says. But you're looking at a lease that's going to have 8 pages, 15 pages, 20 pages, 30, 40, 50 pages. They're there for a reason. You need to know what they say. Of course, there's going to be some standard language, but within that standard language, what are those extra pieces of information that you need to know? And remember, we say standard loosely. One attorney's standard is not another attorney's standard. The standard language one landlord likes to use is not the standard language that another landlord likes to use, which leads us right into the types of leases. So the first type of lease would be a gross rent lease, right? Now, a gross rent lease is kind of awesome in that it allows the tenant to focus on one number and one number only. For example, the monthly rent is $5,000 a month. And they know for that $5,000 a month, everything is included. They don't have to pay anything extra with regards to insurance. They don't have to worry about taxes. I mean, generally, they may or may not have to pay their utilities. The utilities will probably be included as well in a gross lease as well. There's gray area between it. That's why I hesitate. So, for example, certain office buildings, everything will be included, but the actual electric bill usually is not. It can be, but usually is not. Let's go over into the net lease. The net lease is the second type of leases. The net lease is basically where you're responsible for paying one thing, which is the rent. But then, in addition to the rent, you also usually are responsible for paying the property taxes. Now, not necessarily the entire property taxes, or it could be a percentage of the property taxes or a percentage of only the increase of the property taxes. It varies. So basically what we're looking at is the rent in addition to the property taxes. Those are those two elements that we're dealing with. Now we have also what's called a double net. Now a double net will focus on the rent, which is the base rent, and then we're going to have the added rent, which could be the property taxes, again, similar to the net lease, in that we're either paying the entire property tax or a percentage on the increase, depending on how it gets negotiated. But in addition to the taxes, we're also responsible for paying insurance. Yes. Additional insurance that we, the tenant, have to take out to protect and cover the premises that we're renting, that we're leasing, okay? And then we have the triple net lease. Now, a triple net lease, generally speaking, in our area, it's the most common of the leases. And that basically uncovers that you have to pay the rent, the property taxes, the insurance, and the operating costs and utilities and water, for example, as well, would be included in a triple net lease. Now, sometimes there's a variant of the triple net lease where we would call it as an absolute lease. Now, an absolute lease is along the lines of you're responsible for paying everything, but you're also responsible for all damage, structural damage, and that is not included in a triple net. So that's why it varies. And like I said, these 5 types are little gray area in between. That's what negotiations are for. Generally speaking, we may have a standard lease, for example, standard gross rent lease, a standard net lease, a standard double net, a standard triple net. And then we also have the percentage rent lease, which I almost left out, and that would give us our 5. The percentage rent lease, you see that many times with shopping malls or shopping centers where you pay a set amount of rent, but you also then pay a percentage of your gross income or a variation of that to the landlord as well. In other words, you pay your rent, but then you give them a piece of the business. Interesting stuff, but that is not something you will usually see unless you're dealing with malls or shopping centers. So what I was going to say earlier, and I didn't complete my thought, I believe, is with regard to the standard, everybody's going to have a different standard. The landlord between landlords are going to have a different standard. Their attorneys are going to have a different standard. I have standard lease in my office, but my standard lease is not going to be the same as a colleague attorney that I have. And our standard leases changes over time. And one of the main things that fluctuates a standard lease is someone's experience. So if I'm doing this longer and I've seen more, I've learned more, the odds are my standard lease is going to incorporate more protections for my client than someone else's. So for example, my standard lease today is not the same standard lease that I had 10, 15, or 20 years ago. It changes. Okay, so that's what we have. Let me do a quick recap. We got the gross rent, the net lease, the double net, the triple net, and the percentage rent. Those are the five. Now I touched upon the absolute, but the absolute ties into the triple net, so I don't really want to call that a number 6 in the category, right? And now the things outside of rent and the terms of years, remember we discussed these operating costs, and we discussed property taxes, utilities, water, electric, insurance, maintenance, and then there's also as far as taking care of the sidewalk, snow removal, the roof, what if something breaks, who's responsible? In a triple net lease, for example, you sit there, you're in it, 6 months into it, and all of a sudden the HVAC system breaks down, you call your landlord to come fix it, and the landlord says, well, that's your responsibility, Mr. Tenant. Like, what do you mean that's my responsibility? It's not my HVAC system. I found it here. Well, yeah, that becomes your responsibility. If it's a quick fix, good for you. Sometimes you need a whole new system. These are the things you want to think about and negotiate early on before you sign that lease. And not just for purposes of negotiations, but to really be aware of what you're walking into. If you really want the space and this is the norm and you want to conduct your business, then that's okay, but you want to be able to budget for it. You really don't want the surprises. We're going to do another video next week. The next one's going to be on inducements and concessions and renewals and rent increases, going to the next level of concerns that a tenant should have. Until then, if there's anything else you want to see or any questions with regard to the lease, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you think someone may be interested in seeing this, share the video. Why not? It's free. Until next time, be good. Bye.